It was, to all intents and purposes, the first Nirvana show. They played to a crowd of a dozen mullet-headed, metal-loving teenagers. The trio performed a chaotic set, including Downer, Spank Through and Aero Zeppelin. Tony and his friends were all there on that infamous night.
I remember sitting in there and thinking, wow, this is really different than anything that we've been listening to, and I liked it, but then you would hear comments from other people, because they wanted, the heavy metal hair bands.
They wanted us up there
and
playing. And
Nirvana was different, and they didn't appreciate the difference, but there was a lot of people that did.
Yeah.
Chris was really into his guitar. He wanted the feedback, and he'd kind of lay his guitar down, and we would all just
that was a big
plug
thing.
in our ears.
What the different thing was all that feedback.
Yeah.
Their performance didn't benefit from acoustics. I mean, it was.
The thing that struck me was Chris's bass playing. I mean, I picked that up first. I mean, he was just a phenomenal bass player. I just thought, wow, he was really good. And I mean, as far as talent goes, I could see those guys going somewhere. But at the time, it's like I said, we all thought that it's just another band coming to play.
Kurt's voice kind of struck me as unusual too. I remember thinking about his voice, and it wasn't melodious. It was just it was good, and it was different from anything that I've heard before, and I was appreciating that also.
If you run the reel forward and look at the sort of classic Nirvana performance, it was all there. Everything. Same thing he did that night was same show he put on 4 or 5 years later. But he terrorized the sound waves that night.
totally antisocial. I don't remember him speaking the whole night, looking up, making eye contact with anybody.
Even most of the pictures you see, hair covering his face.
Chris was a different story.
Yeah.
He was much more social.
Absolutely.
He was into more of the shock.
Yeah.
Trying to shock everyone. He had vampire blood and he was putting it on him and
duct tape over his
duct tape.
nipples.
Yeah. That's right, I remember that. Yeah. They were jumping on the furniture, standing on the coffee table, jumping on the couch.
Laying the guitar down and having the feedback. And
they didn't start off like that. It kind of started out a little bit mellow, and I think the more they got into the beer, the more that they got rambunctious, and that's when they started getting really...
The style came out there.
And after a while, the sort of music side of the night petered out, and I started kind of making sure where everybody was and that things were okay, and that's when I noticed that things were not okay. The two camps had gotten into this sort of harassment mode where, Chris was belligerent and doing things, and Kurt was trying to upset people with his verbal abuse and whatnot. And
they didn't have a lot of respect for anyone's property.
No.
Not that it was anything special, but
not
what we had is what we
Here
had.
really had respect for the property.
No.
Aaron came up to me and said, "It's time to go." Okay, I think you're right.
The atmosphere that night had got to the point that it was time for them to go. And I just remember them all jumping in the back of this van or carpet truck or whatever it was. There was no lights in the back of it. It was like
no windows,
no windows. It was like a rented U-Haul truck or something. And I just remember them all jumping in the back of that thing and slamming the door down, and off they went. And I think we all just kind of came in to survey the damage by that point.
In the grand scheme of things, for many years, it was not one of my greater moments, The beginning of Nirvana was a shaky ordeal for everybody involved.
Once in a while,
At a local level, the band's determination paid off, slowly developing a loyal fan base in Aberdeen and the surrounding area. But life was still hard for Kurt, taking on many poorly paid jobs to support his music and living rough for many months to come.
The Community World Theater on 56th Street and M in Tacoma, Washington, Jim May's operation there, and it fulfilled a relatively vital need for the growth of Nirvana as a performance band and for our audience.
Well, the first time that I really went to see his band was right after they recorded the Andino demo with Krover. They played a show in Tacoma at the Community World Theater or whatever. It was a little teeny dumpy place that probably used to be a porn theater. And they played with this straight-edge hardcore band. And they were really good.
There was a lot of local talent at that time that was really phenomenal. And I think people need to understand that Nirvana were one of a dozen bands that really were bands that were on the rise in '88 and '89.
And then these were important gigs. I remember Kurt actually worrying about his wardrobe. What was he going to wear? He kind of wanted to wear these funky disco shoes. He thought it'd be funny or something, and would pine over the set it up just so, and this was a big deal. This was to go up there and play in front of people was it. There was nothing, no consideration to what would ultimately happen, and it was painful, because a lot of times nobody'd show up. I mean, just being in the place was painful. They wouldn't have the heat on or anything, and it was pretty primitive in there. That was the proving ground for Nirvana.